5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to Cultivated Live for Thursday, July 31st. Krista, it's the last day of July. That's
It's crazy.
meaningful. Like it seems. You are Krista Raymer.
So
I am Jay
crazy.
Rosenthal. You actually says Krista from Vitrina, but I will change that to say C3 Industries. Vitrina is
Yes.
your previous jam, but you are still gracing us on Thursdays to talk about all things cannabis retail. So thanks for being here.
I'm so happy to be here, Jay.
You
We're
are?
coming in
Good.
hot to August.
What's that again?
We're coming in hot to August.
Yeah, and for those of you who watch this show or stream in Canada, you're heading into, let's call it the midsummer long weekend. So today and tomorrow, big cannabis sales days, presumably, don't you think?
Yeah. Always right before the holiday. Usually we see an amp up on the Thursday, Friday. Less so on the actual weekend days, but bigger ramp prior to the holiday.
Yeah, today could be big as people head out tomorrow for the long weekend to cottage country in most of the country. But Krista, I'm not going to ask you about what's going on in New York in terms of what the OCM has done, but for those that read our newsletter, they know that the Office of Cannabis Management has sent a letter to, I think, about 150 retailers saying, we're actually going to shut you down and make you move because of a mistake we made when we approved your location. They were measuring it from the front door of, say, a school to the front door of a dispensary, as opposed from the property line of the school to the front door of the dispensary. So that's all happening. Today we wrote about lawsuits, or Jeremy did, that are likely to happen. But I wanted to sort of hone in, not about that specifically, about the importance of location for a dispensary. I don't know if you want to talk about how sort of C3 thinks about it, but just in general, when retailers are thinking about where to site, knowing that there's externalities about regulatory, that you can only be in certain areas, you have to be a certain distance from certain other locations like churches, schools, and parks in some places. Like, what should retailers be thinking about when they're trying to site a dispensary?
A dispensary. The lawsuits totally make sense, because if you've already opened up and you already have a customer base, this would not be good news, especially depending on how hard it was to get a landlord to be able to support what you were trying to do. So I can completely understand where those retail operators are at right now. I think when identifying a location, one of the things, and we talked about this like a really long time ago, is actually about convenience and how convenient a location is. And so there are a couple different types of stores within our own internal portfolio. We've been basically calling them store classes, and it is based off of the type of customer behavior that we see at those locations, ultimately driven by how far the customer is from the location. What we have found, and like kind of what I have seen historically as well, is the closer the customer is to the retail location, the more likely they are to be loyal.
That makes sense.
Loyalty being like they get past 2 or 3 transactions. So I think when identifying a location, it's really important to also think about who is our immediate population right around us, and be reasonable with how far a customer is willing to travel based off of the geography and kind of like population density right around the store. Meaning, like, a store within a city is going to have a very tight radius, whereas a store maybe in a rural place within a state, all of those customers are comfortable and familiar with driving quite far distances for all of their other errands, let's say, and so are likely willing to travel a little bit further. The difference, though, is that the behavior shifts. And so the closer they are to the store, the more likely they are to be loyal, but they also make smaller transactions. They make a lot more of them in a year. Whereas somebody who's further from the store is going to have to obviously get in the car and drive. They have a tendency to spend a little bit more while they're in the store and visit less frequently. Also are more likely to be disrupted. Just when you think about your own behaviors and reoccurrence of the same behavior over and over and over again, it's harder to disrupt than something that you've only done a couple of times. So it is definitely a consideration when identifying a location, is how far am I expecting my customers to come? How many customers do I potentially have within the radius around the store? And am I going to be disrupted by other competition?
I'm thinking about that, and having talked to you enough and done this enough to know that it seems like the difference, how you would, if I was working at the store, how you would approach those customers is different as well, right? For the person who comes frequently, lives in a tight radius, and spends less, my goal as a bud tender or someone at the store would be to have them spend a little bit more on one of those transactions, right? Spend more per transaction because they're coming a lot. Whereas the people who are driving further, spending more, coming less frequently, my goal would be to, wouldn't it be great if they came one more time in the course of a 6-month or 12-month run? And that would be a major uptick in that person's behavior. And then figure that to sort of what you do from a marketing perspective, from a product array perspective. Is that, am I learning from Krista over time?
You're learning over time. I think like with the customer that's close by, we've got to be sensitive sometimes to pricing sensitivity. So like that's the other thing that you want to consider within this is within that customer base, how comfortable and what are they used to spending at once, which is getting outside of cannabis and thinking about their actual behavior. So if you live in a city, maybe you are comfortable and familiar with going to a grocery store multiple times in a week and you spend a little bit more each time you go, or spend a little bit less each time you go, but maybe over the span of a year, you actually end up spending more. That is something that I think we don't have a strong enough handle on within the industry is like these customers who make small transactions, but make a lot of them over the year. They might not have the extra $5 to spend when they come into the store. And maybe it's just about keeping them. Just like you don't want them to go somewhere else. Like that amount of revenue, if they are coming in weekly, for example, is incredibly consistent and isn't hard to acquire from, say, for example, needing a lot of discounts or ad spend to bring them in. So the profitability of those transactions is often quite high. Whereas a customer who is spending a lot more, but we've had to target, say, for example, with some level of ads or discounting to get them into the store, profitability on that transaction isn't as high. And so also, if you lose those customers, your revenue consistency is disrupted very quickly. And so I think it's something to think about in where you push spend and how many new customers you need to acquire at any given time. I think like on the further distance travel store, you also are going to have a certain number of customers, depending on if you've picked a convenient location, like on the side of a highway, that are like transient, you're never going to see them again. And so your definition of conversion of loyalty needs to be quite different than if you are, say, for example, within a more urban environment and customers are shopping around the store.
Yeah, and my understanding is sort of what's happening in New York is that a lot of the ones that got these letters that said you're going to move are actually in densely populated areas. That's why they're so close to a school. And to my mind, just judging from what you just said, like they've really made themselves ideally part of that very specifically part of that geographic location, and count on the people within a couple blocks as their core customer base. They can't really move. Like it's a whole new business if they move.
If you move, let's say, for example, even if you move 2 or 3 blocks, that is a different customer base now. And so that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier is that if I were in those retailers' position, I would be very worried about the disruption to our already built customer base and the amount of dollars that we had invested in acquiring all of those customers in the first place. If you've created a sticky enough environment, they might come with you, or you might be able to bring some of them with you, especially depending on how far or like how convenient it is where you're going. But I would be very upset in that moment. But I think there's going to be new customers there on the other side as well, depending on the location. But
yeah, I think calling it very upset is sort of undershooting what these retailers are feeling right now. As well, you think about some of these really densely populated areas, certainly in New York City. If they have to move, the pockets where they can already operate is actually quite small. So if there's actually, they're all going to be moving to the same, if they need to move, to similar pockets closer together.
Yeah, it could be bringing competition closer together, which is like an unintended consequence that I'm sure wasn't really considered when we sent out the letters.
Right. So we'll continue to follow it. If you want to know more, follow cultivated.news because, well, all this week we've been covering it, but it seems to be a moving target, what's happening in New York and how people are responding. Can I shift gears for 1 second while I still have some time with you? This week, our partners at Lit Alerts shared some really interesting information about SKU counts in 5 East Coast markets, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, which I thought was interesting. Can I show you?
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So here's
You're looking for live reactions.
I'm looking for live reactions, like showing you an ad. So this is the average number of cannabis items on menu. So important to note that it's actually on menu, what customers can actually see. Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Some of the interesting things that I saw was vapes. Like if you add up pre-roll and flower, that equals a lot. But certainly sort of pure flower, vapes are outperforming in outperform. That's not the right word. There are more on the menu.
There's more optionality. Yeah.
Right. More optionality. See, that's the right word. On vapes in New York, Maryland, and New Jersey versus flower. I thought that was interesting and wanted to share with you. Like, it's not a massive number, but it is more. And then edibles, there's a lot of them, but that's because of variety of form factors and sizes and size packets, all that, and flavors. Anything here stick out at you as like interesting or worth talking about?
I mean, first look, this is like a representation of what the customer can see when they're going onto a website to make a purchase or a decision, or walk into the store. But they probably might have a couple more options if they're in the store, just given if they have small amounts of SKU quantity sitting on hand of certain products. I have a theory.
Oh, I like theories.
I have a theory that this could be the tail wagging the dog, and that vape units, specifically in these markets where there are kind of like high SKU counts comparative to, say, for example, flower, on a per unit basis, they're still quite high. And so there is a level of convenience factor, which could be, influencing this. We do see more convenience-based products being purchased over the summertime, so that could also influence vapes. But this likely is retailers taking a look at what is driving revenue and reinvesting there. What's interesting is that I think, like, by the time that you get to a certain amount of choice, you then drive down the likelihood of a customer making a decision.
Right.
And so I don't know how you make a choice between 151 vapes if you're a vape customer, although there would be, subcategories within this, whether that be carts or not. But yeah, this is a lot of choice compared to, say, for example, flower. I mean, there are also different shifts by market, but product availability could also be a big underlying pull here. We have stores in only 3 of these states, sorry. And so we see that within New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Massachusetts also has a low purchasing limit, and so that has a tendency to influence also the amount of SKU depth across flower.
Interesting. The other thing that mine's not as nuanced as yours, but Connecticut barely has any products that you can actually buy. I mean, I know you operate in Connecticut, but it's a different kind of market than, say, New York or New Jersey. But also Maryland, there's also very few stores relative to the size of the state. And so the SKU counts account for that. Plus, as Little Alerts wrote in our newsletter, like, it's a pretty deep medical market even still. So that concentrates sort of over index because they're not covered under the what you can actually buy. Like, it doesn't count against you, I guess. Like, you can buy more if you're buying concentrates for a medical patient.
Purchasing limit is.
That's the word I was looking for, purchasing limit. So it is interesting to sort of look at and have you take a look at sort of first blush without you having actually seen it. But we saw that this week in Little Alerts, which we like to get your thoughts on as well. Anything else going on out there midsummer?
Well, I think it's interesting if you look at that and look at the evolution over time. Like, if you look at how many SKUs did a market launch with, and then a year in, what does it look like? And 2 years in, what does it look like? We see this growth, and you can see it in the Massachusetts numbers there. We see it within our own retail portfolio, is that pre-rolls then start to dominate. And so just from a number of units moving out the doors. And so how many choices do you need for kind of like low investment units is always a question we internally are trying to navigate.
Interesting. Well, and there's, we could even continue to watch this and see if it goes up or down in some categories, or down overall, because retailers are honing sort of what they carry. They understand their customers more, which goes back to the other part, understanding your customers that are in close radius and far radius, depending on where you are, and catering to that. Krista, as always, Enjoy seeing you on Thursdays. We'll be back
Yes.
next Thursday, question mark. Don't know,
Okay.
but we'll let our folks know. But thank you for your time. Look forward to connect with you again, and have a good Simcoe Day long weekend. See, I did it there.
Well, you nailed it. It's very Canadian of us.
It's very good. Neither one of us are actually going to be in Canada next weekend, but for our comrades up there, enjoy the long weekend. Thanks, Krista.
Thanks, Jay.